China is full of small design decisions that quietly outperform the way the rest of the world does things. Not mega projects, not futuristic prototypes. Everyday systems engineered so well they change how people live without anyone calling them innovations. Once you see how these pieces fit together, you start to realize how much friction you've normalized in your own life. Here are 12 genius things in China that will genuinely shift your sense of what's possible. 1. The balcony drying microclimate. Most homes treat laundry as an intrusion. Damp air drifting through bedrooms, racks blocking walkways, radiators pressed into service as makeshift dryers. An enclosed balcony changes that dynamic entirely. By sealing the space with glass, the balcony becomes a warm, weatherproof chamber where sunlight and convection do the work automatically. Heat gathers, air circulates, and clothes dry faster than they would on indoor racks or in energy-hungry machines. Ceiling-mounted rails lift everything overhead, keeping the floor clear and the room functional. Because the drying happens in a semi-outdoor zone, moisture never seeps into the living areas, and fabrics avoid the musty smell that comes from hanging laundry in enclosed rooms. The gentler environment also preserves clothing far better than the high heat of a tumble dryer. What emerges is a small architectural buffer, neither fully inside nor outside, built around a single task. It keeps humidity out of the home, trims energy use, and removes a domestic compromise you've probably been working around for years. After living with a setup like this, the idea of drying clothes in a bedroom feels strangely outdated. 2. Community fitness zones. Exercise often becomes something people have to schedule. A trip to the gym, a block of time carved out, a destination separate from daily life. In many Chinese neighborhoods, movement is folded directly into the spaces people already pass through. Fitness equipment sits in courtyards, parks, and the open areas between residential buildings, turning activity into something people slip into naturally. The machines are deliberately simple. No screens, no cables, nothing fragile. Body weight, leverage, and controlled arcs of motion do the work, making the equipment usable across ages and fitness levels. Because the mechanics are intuitive, residents step onto the machines without instruction or hesitation. Morning walkers stretch, teenagers test balance, and office workers loosen stiff shoulders on their way home. These areas quickly become informal social points, with neighbors exchanging small talk between repetitions. Placement is intentional, close enough to foot traffic to feel inviting, spaced far enough apart to avoid bottlenecks. Durable materials withstand constant use and weather with minimal upkeep. Lighting extends the window of use into early mornings and late evenings, smoothing out peak demand. The result is steady, low-pressure activity woven into the rhythm of daily life, rather than concentrated into occasional workouts. The equipment behaves like public health infrastructure, quiet, accessible, and self-maintaining. After spending time in a neighborhood built this way, the idea of exercise being confined to a membership-based facility feels oddly limited. 3. The electric kettle. Hot water is one of those everyday needs that still slows people down. A stovetop takes minutes to reach a boil, microwaves heat unevenly, and both interrupt the flow of whatever you were doing. In Chinese households, that delay barely exists. The electric kettle sits on the counter as a default appliance, delivering boiling water in roughly a minute. That speed reshapes dozens of small tasks. Tea becomes an immediate action. Noodles soften without planning. And ingredients can be blanched the moment you think of it. The design stays intentionally minimal. One button, a clear indicator light, and an automatic shutoff create a tool that works without supervision. Because it heats only the water required, energy use stays low and efficiency stays high. Offices rely on kettles to keep workflow uninterrupted, and dorm rooms treat them as essential equipment rather than optional conveniences. The consistency builds trust. Every cycle behaves the same, every boil predictable. What emerges is a quiet piece of kitchen infrastructure that supports cooking, cleaning, and daily rhythm without drawing attention to itself. It resets expectations around speed and convenience, making older methods feel cumbersome by comparison. Once you've lived with this level of immediacy, waiting for a stovetop pot to boil feels like unnecessary friction. 4. The indoor slipper boundary. The moment someone steps inside a home, the floor becomes the first surface to absorb whatever the outside world carried in. Dust, moisture, and fine debris accumulate quickly, turning routine cleaning into a cycle of constant recovery. In Chinese households, that transfer is interrupted at the threshold with a simple, durable habit. Outdoor shoes stop immediately, and soft indoor slippers take over. The shift is small but changes how the entire interior behaves. Floors stay cleaner for longer, and sweeping becomes a light maintenance task rather than a daily reset. Sound levels drop as cushioned soles mute footsteps across tile and wood. The practice also protects flooring materials from the abrasion caused by grit and hard treads. Slippers themselves are lightweight, easy to store, and comfortable enough to wear for hours without thought. Guests adjust without hesitation because the expectation is obvious the moment they enter. The boundary creates a psychological cue as well. Crossing it signals entry into a controlled, private environment. Children can play on the ground without parents worrying about what has been tracked in. The home feels calmer because the space remains visually cleaner and acoustically softer. Enforcement is minimal. A small rack, a visible pair of slippers, and a defined threshold communicate everything. The habit eventually becomes automatic, and walking indoors with street shoes starts to feel unnecessarily harsh. 5. The all-day hot water thermos. Daily routines waste more heat than most people realize. Water gets boiled, partially used, left to cool, and then reheated hours later, turning a simple task into a loop of small inefficiencies. In Chinese households, that cycle is broken by a single object, a large insulated thermos designed to keep water at drinkable temperature from morning to night. One boil becomes an entire day's supply. Thick vacuum insulation slows heat loss dramatically, allowing the thermos to maintain warmth without electricity or constant attention. That stability changes how people move through their day. Tea becomes immediate. Instant meals require no planning, and utensils can be sterilized on demand. Cutting out repeated reheating also trims energy use, which matters in homes where hot drinks are part of the daily rhythm. A wide mouth makes refilling easy, and the durable metal body withstands years of continuous use. Many families keep multiple thermoses in different rooms, turning hot water into a shared household utility rather than a kitchen-only resource. Offices scale the idea up with larger units that support dozens of people without constant boiling. The thermos functions as quiet infrastructure, simple, reliable, and always ready. It smooths transitions between tasks and eliminates the micro delays that accumulate throughout the day. Once you've lived with steady, effortless access to hot water, the habit of reheating a kettle several times a day feels unnecessarily wasteful. 6. The mahjong table. Adult social life often thins out as routines harden. Work stretches into the evening, schedules drift apart, and meeting up starts requiring coordination that few people have the bandwidth for. In Chinese homes and community spaces, a single object pushes back against that drift: the mahjong table. It functions less like a game surface and more like a piece of social infrastructure. The table gives people a reason to sit together without invitations, planning, or ceremony. Modern versions automate the shuffling and stacking of tiles, removing downtime and keeping the pace steady. The sound of tiles sliding and clacking creates a familiar rhythm that fills the room without overwhelming it. Because the game is designed for 4 players, it naturally forms balanced groups that rotate as people come and go. The table becomes a gravitational point for conversation, snacks, and casual interaction. Older adults treat it as cognitive exercise, while younger players use it as a low-pressure alternative to screen-based socializing. The rules are structured enough to stay engaging, but flexible enough to allow conversation throughout the game. A living room, courtyard, or community center equipped with a mahjong table turns into a social hub with almost no effort. 7. The precision rice cooker. Stovetop rice exposes how sensitive grains are to heat, timing, and attention. A few seconds too long scorches the bottom. A moment too early leaves the center firm. Even slight variations in water quality shift the final texture. In Chinese kitchens, that uncertainty is removed by a precision rice cooker built to manage every variable automatically. Sensors track temperature, moisture, and internal pressure in real time, adjusting the heating curve second by second. The result is rice that turns out the same way every time, regardless of who presses the button or what variety is used. The machine handles the entire sequence, soaking, simmering, steaming, and resting, without supervision, freeing the cook to focus on other dishes. Its insulated body keeps rice warm for hours without drying or clumping, turning it into a dependable anchor for the meal. Families rely on it because it eliminates the mental load of coordinating multiple components. Restaurants scale the same logic with larger units that maintain consistency across hundreds of servings. The interface stays intentionally minimal, one button for standard cooking, a few presets for specialty grains, nothing extraneous. Cleanup is straightforward thanks to a removable nonstick pot. The cooker becomes a stabilizing force in the kitchen, ensuring that one of the most common foods is always prepared with precision. Once you've used a machine that delivers this level of reliability, returning to stovetop rice feels like reintroducing unnecessary risk. 8. The multi-generational public park. Urban parks often end up serving one group well and everyone else incidentally. Children get playgrounds, adults get jogging paths, older residents get benches, and the spaces operate in parallel rather than together. In Chinese neighborhoods, the design brief shifts toward coexistence. A single park is expected to support dancers, walkers, Tai Chi groups, chess players, children, and retirees, without any group displacing another. Layout carries most of the load. Open plazas sit beside shaded seating, while looping paths circle activity zones instead of cutting directly through them. This arrangement keeps movement smooth and prevents conflicts between fast and slow users. Stretching equipment sits near rest areas, so older adults can alternate between activity and recovery without strain. Playgrounds are positioned close enough for parents to supervise, but far enough to keep noise from overwhelming the entire space. Lighting extends the park's usefulness into early mornings and late evenings, distributing foot traffic across more hours and reducing crowding. The result is a landscape that stays active from dawn to night without feeling chaotic. People of different ages occupy the same environment while pursuing entirely different routines. The park becomes a social equalizer rather than a specialized facility, supporting health, connection, and daily rhythm without requiring programs, staff, or signage. Once you've spent time in a space designed for simultaneous use across generations, single-purpose parks feel strangely underbuilt. 9. The shoe washing machine. Cleaning modern sneakers exposes how poorly traditional methods match the materials. Mesh traps dirt deep in its weave, foam midsoles discolor quickly, and hand scrubbing rarely restores the original finish. In Chinese apartments, that entire problem is handed off to a compact appliance built specifically for footwear. This isn't a scaled-down washing machine, it's a device engineered around the structure and vulnerabilities of sneakers. The drum rotates with controlled, low-stress agitation that lifts grime without bending the shoe or weakening adhesives. Targeted water jets focus on the areas that collect the most dirt: soles, mesh panels, heel counters, while avoiding the high-pressure blasts that deform lightweight materials. Detergent is dispensed in small, precise amounts to protect color and fabric integrity. Internal racks hold each pair in place so they don't collide or twist during the cycle. A built-in drying system circulates warm air evenly, preventing the warping that happens when shoes are left near radiators or in direct sunlight. The full process finishes in a few hours instead of a full day. Families use the machine because it keeps school shoes, running shoes, and daily pairs in wearable condition with almost no effort. Some apartment buildings install shared units in utility rooms to reduce clutter inside homes. The appliance extends the lifespan of footwear and keeps it looking presentable with minimal maintenance. Once you've used a machine engineered specifically for sneakers, returning to hand scrubbing feels like unnecessary labor. 10. The table center hot pot cooker. Cooking and eating often happen in separate rooms, creating a divide between preparation and participation. One person manages timing, heat, and sequencing, while everyone else waits for the meal to arrive fully formed. In Chinese homes and restaurants, that separation dissolves around a single piece of hardware, a heat source built directly into the center of the dining table. The hot pot cooker turns dinner into an ongoing shared process rather than a staged presentation. Broth simmers steadily in the middle while ingredients are added in small waves, creating a continuous cycle of cooking and eating. Heat stays tightly localized, keeping the table safe to touch while maintaining a consistent boil. Simple temperature controls let diners adjust intensity without interrupting conversation. Because everything cooks in real time, ingredients retain their freshness and ideal texture. Thin slices of meat finish in seconds, vegetables soften at their own pace, and noodles reach the perfect bite exactly when someone wants them. The format encourages longer meals with people rotating ingredients, sharing portions, and settling into a natural rhythm. Cleanup is minimal because the cooker is either built into the table or sits flush on top of it. Restaurants use induction versions for efficiency, while homes rely on compact electric models that store easily. The system removes the pressure of synchronizing multiple dishes and replaces it with a collaborative, unhurried flow. Once you've eaten around a setup like this, the traditional divide between kitchen and dining room feels unnecessarily rigid. 11. The centralized hot water boiler room. Hot water systems in many buildings operate as a patchwork of individual units. Each apartment installs its own heater, manages its own repairs, and deals with temperature swings that vary from floor to floor. In Chinese residential complexes, that fragmentation is replaced by a single building-wide solution, a centralized boiler room that heats water for every unit. Insulated pipes distribute a steady supply throughout the structure, creating a level of consistency that small, isolated heaters rarely achieve. Showers stay stable, sinks don't sputter, and residents never wait for a tank to refill. One large boiler also runs more efficiently than dozens of small ones, reducing overall energy consumption. Maintenance becomes far simpler because technicians service a single location rather than entering individual homes. Removing bulky heaters from apartments frees up space in kitchens and bathrooms, making layouts cleaner and easier to use. Temperature regulation happens at the building level, ensuring that every unit receives water at the same reliable heat. Thick insulation keeps the system efficient even in winter, preventing heat loss as water travels through the structure. For residents, the entire setup is invisible. No switches, no adjustments, no troubleshooting. It operates quietly in the background, behaving like true infrastructure rather than a household chore. The stability of the system also extends the lifespan of pipes and fixtures because they operate under predictable conditions. Once you've lived in a building where hot water is handled collectively, managing a personal heater feels unnecessarily complicated. 12. The delivery locker network. Missed deliveries create a chain reaction of inconvenience. Packages arrive when no one is home, couriers leave notes, and residents spend the next day adjusting their schedule for a second attempt. In Chinese residential compounds, that entire loop is replaced by a dense network of delivery lockers positioned directly at the entrance. Couriers place parcels into individual compartments, scan a code, and the system sends an instant notification to the recipient. Timing stops being a variable. Packages wait securely behind locked doors instead of sitting on doorsteps or in building lobbies. Theft becomes rare because each pickup requires a unique access code. Weather damage disappears as parcels stay protected from rain, heat, and humidity. Residents collect items whenever it fits their routine, before work, after dinner, or during a quick walk outside. The lockers are modular, allowing buildings to expand capacity as delivery volume grows. Refrigerated compartments handle groceries and medicine, extending the system beyond standard parcels. The interface is deliberately minimal: scan, open, grab, close. No signatures, no queues, no coordination with staff. Maintenance stays simple because each compartment is a mechanical unit with electronic locking, rather than a complex machine. The lockers blend into the residential landscape, functioning like a modern evolution of the mailbox. Once you've used a system that removes every point of friction from receiving packages, waiting at home for a courier feels unnecessarily restrictive. None of these ideas are futuristic. They're simple, precise, and engineered around how people actually live. That's what makes them powerful. When you see them together, you start to notice how many daily frustrations you've accepted as normal, and how easily they could disappear with better design.